and welcome everyone. We are now streaming this webinar live on Facebook, and we are with Emily Windsor-Cragg. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much, Alfred. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, totally, totally.
This is a challenge, you know. This is a big job we have.
These are like just the hurdles that, you know, this is just when you try a hurdle race. They have those international track meets. These are just the hurdles at the beginning of the 100-meter hurdle race.
Yes, and we are now the older generation.
Well,
and
no,
so we have
we're not for the elect.
Okay.
The world would not be saved. And so we're with Emily Windsor-Cragg, and we will have this in the article that accompanies this webinar. But Emily Windsor-Cragg is the daughter, has established her claim as the daughter of King Edward VIII, and has filed the claim to the UK Crown, to the Crown of England, with the UK Parliament. And so that's going forward. So our faculty today has a distinguished background, genetically and in terms of magisterial potential.
Well, as David Icke keeps saying, the royal house has a direct connection to the reptilians, to the Anunnaki, and to the ET relationships. And so what I've been doing is digging into the history to see if this is actually so. And there were two lines of thinking from the Anunnaki. One was from Enlil, and the other was from Enki. Now, Enki taught the metaphysics, the eschatology of the Anunnaki theology, which we know as the law of one. And Enlil taught the civil side, which came to us as the Noahide laws, and as the Code of Hammurabi, and as the Mosaic law, and as common law. And those two threads of training and teaching and education have been running parallel since the Anunnaki began their social experiment 208,000 years ago. Okay, so what I thought I would do today is review that history of law, because it doesn't happen at the university. The university doesn't talk about the paradigms of law that our civil society has been through and how that has affected not only history, but simple social human behavior. Now,
now, not to interrupt you, but I will. Because there's one thing that we should also mention, as long as you're going into the history of holy law, and that is that quite recently, at the beginning of this week, we had another distinguished faculty member on, and that was Dwight Eisenhower's great-granddaughter, Laura Eisenhower, and she mentioned the Emerald Covenant Treaty, the ET Treaty. Now, you're going to mention that as well.
Yes, and that's where I'm starting. I'm starting from that treaty and from its stipulations. You see, in the beginning of the third seeding, as described by Ashia-Nadine in Voyagers 2, the third seeding was after the 1,000 Years' War, and there were certain underlying assumptions that were made at the galactic level. And so the ET Treaty, let's see. The stipulations were that no racial or physical bioregenesis development was to be permitted whatsoever, that races were and are sacrosanct, with superior races and inferior races, with ideological purity and a hierarchical and bureaucratic system of influence that guaranteed top-down rulership. So let's think about the implications of what we've just said. there was to be no genetic engineering under the El Anu Treaty. But when they changed and altered and hybridized the Neanderthal line to generate gold miners for themselves in South Africa, that's exactly what they did. All right. Hybrids, any genetic racial hybrid was thought to be absolutely worthless at the level of garbage. And this is why abductions were allowed. This is why human experimentation in eating humans are allowed by the ETs so long as they're helping themselves to hybrids. This may have something to do with the fact that our indigenous tribes today, who have remained faithful to their own cultures, have not been troubled as much by abductions as the mixed societies of the East and West. I have to wonder about that. But the only law that they had was that you couldn't hybridize, you couldn't marry somebody of a different race. You couldn't, miscegenation is the technical word for hybridizing members of two different races. That was the worst crime that they had on the books. That was the only crime they had on the books. And the Anunnaki live according to the law of one. Now, what's the law of one? I have a link that I've given to you on the Law of One site, but here's a summary of the beliefs and practices of the members of the Law of One. You ignore the negative because focusing on it makes it grow. There's no purpose for anger. We're all one, so it's all good. As behavior is, so whatever the behavior is, it is. Unfounded, uninformed opinions are just as good as informed opinions. Nothing matters because everything is an illusion. Evil is necessary. Karma is different from evil and free will. You accept everything and you never resist. And a watered down form of the law of attraction, in which you always attract your best, what is best for you, completely ignores the function of time and process in biology, which is driven by electronics, cell electronics, and not only the law of attraction, but the law of repulsion. So the first set of laws that came here from on high, from the deities, was that behavior didn't matter. Only attitude mattered. The next set of laws we got was I don't know which came first, the Noahide laws or the Hammurabi, but in the 7 Noahide laws, it was all behavioral. Idolatry was forbidden, incest was forbidden, murder was forbidden, cursing was forbidden, theft was forbidden, and eating the flesh of a living animal was forbidden. But those laws didn't touch deceit, treachery, or witchcraft. They didn't have any effect in the subjective, okay? And so if you violated any of these laws, they killed you, and it was simple as that. The next code of law that came up.
Sorry, could I jump in?
Yeah.
Do you mean that if you violated any of the subjective laws, or if you violated any of the behavioral laws, they killed you?
There you go. In the Anunnaki culture, people, or the spirits, or the individuals who do not conform to thought groups, and they are in factions, are considered dissidents who are disrupting the social order, and they are sacrificed. Under the Noahide laws, you were sacrificed for certain behaviors.
I see.
Under the Code of Hammurabi, that is all behavioral. If you do X, Y, Z, you are put to death. If you do ABC, you're put to death. Every penalty was to be put to death if you didn't act right, you didn't behave right. And so the next set we got, which was the Mosaic laws from Enlil, through Enlil from Moses, okay. Those were behavioral too, but the linchpin in the Mosaic law was that it was a combination of behavior and attitude, all right? They had judicial courts in which they appointed judges who were not supposed to be bribed. They dealt with cases of conflict. They adjudicated cases of purchase and sale. The parties to a suit had to be present in a hearing and give testimony, and their testimony had to be attested to and validated. So there was the first instance in which both behavior and intention were brought together in the case of a conflict in order to solve the problem and relieve the conflict. The outcome of the original Mosaic law was reparations. It was restoring what was stolen, fixing what was broken, repairing relationships, okay? And the Mosaic law is the basis for the common laws of the land, which existed in our world even up to our Constitution, which wasn't overturned until 1871, when the US became a corporation that was since then subject to corporate statutes and administrative codes rather than to common law. This is why the people who argue for the Constitution and the people who are setting out in courts cases of rule baiting and human trafficking and civil asset forfeiture and revenue generation by small-time jurisdictions, this is why their cases contradict completely, because they're on two different levels of law. One is the law of behavior of the people on the land, and the other is basically derived from the maritime admiralty laws of the British Navy, okay? And those laws are not really laws because they're all rules. A law is do not murder. A rule is don't stick your gum to the underside of the table, okay? And what happened in the United States was that our common laws have been essentially plowed under and replaced by the maritime admiralty laws of the British Navy. Now, what happened when Eisenhower signed the Greada Treaty, okay, and this is in a file that is on the Abide Miracles site and was done originally. What was the name of that guy? It's
How can people reach that website?
Pardon me?
It's at abidemiracles.com.
Okay, and the file name is 56789.htm, and that's just the story of Eisenhower as told by William Cooper.
I see.
In his book. And according to William Cooper's version of the Greada Treaty, it allowed abductions, which the El Treaty also allowed. It allowed human experimentation, as the it basically allowed everything that the El Treaty allowed. So that abductions and human trafficking and experimentation and body parts marketing became legally part of the civil and administrative codes of the United States. And this is why pedophilia took off, because pedophilia is a form of human trafficking.
Right.
Okay, so you see how that treaty initiated the spark that gave pedophilia and human trafficking a boost so that they could be carried on, if not openly, but at least legally in the legalistic sense. Now, one of the reasons that I'm kind of critical of the legal profession is that the legal profession has not been talking about the evolution of law in our world, from purely subjective to behavioral to subjective and behavioral, to the place where some very horrific practices with very bad outcomes for human beings are allowed legally. I think that the legal profession should have had the courage and the devotion to service and principle to come forward and narrate the fact that maritime admiralty law makes legal usury and slavery and pedophilia, when in fact they do violate common laws against harm and waste and cruelty out of hand. All right, so the Greada Treaty put the maritime admiralty statutes in favor of abuse and pedophilia and so forth on a legal footing. The next treaty that the government signed with the ETs was the Tau 9. And I got to know Dan Burish pretty well, and he is a very idealistic human being and a gentle human being. And when I looked at the provisions of the Tau 9 Treaty, there were no human rights discussed. It's all just commercial. The Tau 9 is purely commercial. The TPP is purely commercial. There is nowhere in the ET treaties where human sovereignty or human rights or human dignity, or even a process to qualify human beings into a set of stack ranks so that some people qualify for human rights, okay? As it is now, nobody does. You know, we're all just chattel cattle, according to the Bar Association, Inns of Court in City of London. We're all just chattel cattle, Alfred. Now, one of the things that the LNU Treaty said was that human society was supposed to have been organized in a hierarchy according to some rational principles of organization. So you would think that if they wanted to do that, they would have had qualifying steps for human beings to serve at different levels throughout society. But instead, what they did, they set up their secrecy programs. And the problem with secrecy has precipitated corruption at a terrible level. Let me tell you why. The human spirit is a fractal. It's a fractal of the whole, unless secrecy has been used to take truth, to take truth's oxygen of knowledge, remove knowledge so that people cannot be fractals of the whole. Secrecy is like a cancer, because It prevents the oxygen of knowledge from percolating through society, and accountability is compromised at every level. Because secrecy is lawful, and because psychic skills have been condemned since, well, they're not mentioned in the Noahide laws, okay, but they're specifically condemned in the Old Testament and by Christianity, and I believe in Islam also. Psychic skills are terrible. they're witchcraft, okay. At the same time, the government has been studying psychic skills and witchcraft and using secrecy. And both of those things together means that the man on the street has no access to what is true about vital issues of defense, pollution, economy. Everything that the guy on the street gets has been contrived and staged and made up to tell what people want to know, whether it's true or not. So in order for us to turn this around, okay, we have to abrogate the treaties that tell us that no human being has any sovereign rights whatsoever, top to bottom. We have to eliminate the practice of secrecy in representative governments and allow sovereign citizens to have access at the highest levels of problem solving and troubleshooting. And we have to, as the Army tried to for a while, educate the people who have the basic genetic connections to telepathic skills, telepathy, clairaudience, clairvoyance, intuition. There's a whole plethora of telepathic skills that are possible, but we haven't been entertaining those skills. What reminded me of this, now you were around during the Vietnam War. Remember how—
No, I took a hike on a Fulbright to Uruguay. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. But the Vietnamese people of North Vietnam beat the crap out of the US Army.
Yeah.
And how did they do it? They did it with their folk magic. They did it with their intuition.
They did it with what?
Witchcraft.
Folk?
They did it with witchcraft.
Oh, witchcraft.
Yes, they did some of the weirdest, strangest things. It would never occur to a rational, educated person, because they had an overwhelming enemy, and so they used their psychic skills to defeat this huge American army. And I'm convinced, because I've read so much into the Essene theology, which is the basis of the Lyran Wars. You know, Lyra was completely destroyed because it was a cooperative society that didn't have any idea how to deal with either deceit or treachery. If the Lyrans had had use of their psychic skills, they could have saved themselves, and they could still, well, now the Lyran survivors were brought to the North Pole when it was called Atlantis, and they scattered into Siberia and Russia and North Europe. And they are the ones that the New World Order wants to diminish and subjugate to the rest of the world, because
Now where are the Lyran survivors?
The survivors of the Lyran Wars were the citizens of Atlantis.
Right.
That is where the Anunnaki originally settled until they began their gold mining in South Africa, and then in lower South America.
Right.
Okay,
Now,
so
yeah, so you're, well, yeah. So what you're saying is that the Lyrans originally settled in Atlantis.
they were in Atlantis when the Anunnaki came.
Yeah, and now, so how would people now know if they are uh, uh, if they are progeny of
DNA test
Lyran
is the only way.
survivors?
Yeah,
Sorry.
the DNA test.
Yeah,
And that's the only way we know who we are is by checking our DNA. Now, we originally had 12.
no, right. But I mean, typically, are we talking about the Scots, the Celts?
Yeah, the Scots, the Celts, the Norwegians, the Vikings, the White Russians, from Ukraine. Um, they also had red-headed giants among them. A lot of explorers and settlers came here from Sirius A, Sirius B, the Pleiades, the Andromedans. Okay, we've had a lot of settlers here. In North America before the indigenous tribes we have now, there were red-headed giants that were 8 feet tall. We're digging them up now. Okay, and there were lots of giants.
Oh, but even more. I think that the big cover-up is the 12 to 20-foot giants.
Oh, yeah.
The Nephilim.
They're scary.
And as I understand it, there's been a big conspiracy at the Smithsonian. The principal job of the Smithsonian was to cover up the giants
to cover up the giant
for the great public, to cover up the era of the giants for the public, and to make sure that no digs took place, that all the bones were hidden.
Yes.
That's why the Smithsonian was established.
Yes, of course. And that's according to the Anunnaki doctrine that says there's only a certain history that is allowed to be shared. Now, when I worked at the Kroeber Library in 1962 through 68, okay, what I noticed was that anthropologists to the individual doing their PhD dissertations all pointed to 6,000 years of human history and nothing else before it. And I knew that propaganda and dogma were driving the whole chronology. I found out more about chronology about 2 years ago when I started doing a TV series with Richard Williams, who's in Spain and has his own TV producing place. We never finished it because what I found was the chronology we have. This is not year 2017. I hate to tell you, this year is actually 3127 or something. Okay.
You mean, that's the Anno Dei. That's the year of Christ.
You're talking about the Vatican. There's the Vatican chronology. There's the Jewish chronology. Okay. Yeah. And there's a dozen other calendars.
Oh yeah, sure.
But
this is the Gregorian.
Blows it away. The Colbert blows it all away.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and let me tell you why. We know that Nibiru comes here every 3,657 years, like on clockwork. It's literally a clockwork.
It comes every
3,657 years. That's 1/7 of a precession of the equinoxes. It's like a clockwork. It's like the moon cycle. It's like the sun coming up and going down. It has a cycle. It's inevitable.
Now, are you talking? This is where I'm going to get into some detailed questions, if you don't.
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's fine.
Background. There have been some very interesting research that comes out of Buddhist researchers that and that come out of the inner earth teachings that show that in fact the dual sun, and this is consistent with the Nibiru 3,600 year cycle. However, the dual sun cycle is 1,200 years.
Okay, I don't know about the dual sun cycle.
Okay, so just to make sure, so everybody understands that when we're talking about Nibiru, we're not talking about the dual sun, i.e. Nibiru is not the brown dwarf. Nibiru is a different planet. Is that what?
Exactly.
Okay,
And it's in
so
a
we
long
have
orbit.
a dual sun, which is Sol, S-O-L,
Uh-huh.
you know, up there, and we can even get into that. And then there is a twin sun where the majority of solar systems in this galaxy, and perhaps in the universe, are actually dual sun systems.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah, and if you look at the yin-yang symbol, which is an infinity sign, it's like an 8 on its side. And if you put at the maximum the two suns at the end, that's their cycle. They go back and forth like a yin-yang sign. And in fact, some of the hidden occult knowledge is that the yin-yang symbol is a hidden symbol for our dual sun.
Well,
And
that's fine.
yeah. Now,
but it doesn't affect our legal system.
No, right. I'm just making the point that some people out there and in the culture, they commonly mistake Nibiru for the dual sun.
Okay.
And that conflation has led to enormous confusion, even in the awakening world.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that.
All right,
now,
and I'm going to let that be okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking, for example,
I get that it's okay
my law school class is having its 50th anniversary. And so I'm thinking of sharing this webinar in Holy Law with my law school graduating class of 1967, because they've been out for 50 years and it's time for them to learn some law.
Cool.
So, excuse me, fellas. And so, no, really. And so some of them may not be familiar with Nibiru and the Anunnaki. So could you, when you refer to the Anunnaki, could you define that? And when you refer to Nibiru, as opposed to the dual sun, could you define that just for audience members who may not be familiar with those terms?
Okay, now the Nibiru is its own small cluster. Okay, it has its own moons. It has, and I understand it is also associated with Nemesis, which is a brown dwarf star, and the whole cluster moves in this huge orbit around where we are, wherever this is. All right, and my point is that the last time Nibiru came through, which was 3,657 years ago, our historical records have no record of it. They don't have any record of that visit. They don't have any record of the visit 7,200 years ago or of 10,600 years ago. Or the only record we have is of Noah's flood, which was 12,000 years ago, which was 4 cycles ago. So our history doesn't include Nibiru as a clock piece that comes through astronomically and does all kinds of crazy, wild things every 3,657 years.
Okay, now, may I raise my hand in this webinar and make observations?
Yes.
Okay, if one goes to the dual sun, yin-yang symbol, when the two suns are at maximum, they call that the Kali Yuga, because the two suns are most separate. And the formula there, sort of the moral formula for what's happening on Earth at that time is the Kali Yuga, which is, it's 1 part virtue to 3 parts sin.
Okay.
And that is when,
And what you're talking about is a subjective. That's
yeah,
the subjective
yeah,
interpretation.
and that's when horrible things are happening. Now, when the 2 suns are closest together, okay, which happens every 12,500 years, that is called the golden age because of certain electromagnetics that happen, because there you don't have 1 part sin to 4 parts to 3 parts virtue. Everything is in virtue for a certain period of time on the subjective, because everyone, the frequencies are such that everybody is in 5th density, what we call unity consciousness.
Okay, and that's the metaphysical.
When you are in separation, they are the effects of what we call duality consciousness, of I win and you lose, a zero sum, that zero sum.
Okay.
That's at maximum, but it comes. However, and this is the big however, and I'm just passing on the results of a 5-part series that I did with a Buddhist scholar who explained this, okay? And so when the 2 suns are most together, every 12,500 years, it's called the golden age. However, it's the most cataclysmic age because the 2 suns are most together, their gravity comes most together, you have the close passage of the 2 suns, and that's when you have all these cataclysmic things. So that happens every 12,500 years. So that seems to be consistent with what you just said of Noah's flood, that you have records of the 12,500 years ago. And let me finish, because what I've always understood was that Nibiru was an unascended planet from the Sirius B system that has now entered our system to see if it could ascend with Earth to 5th density. And actually, when I went to Adam's calendar in Africa, in South Africa, that was a point, and I actually saw, I went to the place and said, that's Enki's grave there. And there was like a mini Stonehenge there in stone.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of Adam's.
Yeah, which is where the Anunnaki, and then they had all the gold mines that extended all the way north to the next country and to the next nation up. And they were all in stone circles.
Yeah.
It's all configured with Sirius B.
And that's
which is where Nibiru had come from, so it was the Anunnaki planet. But that's different from the dual sun.
Okay. And that is a metaphysical explanation for the part of the story that Enki has been teaching all along, okay? But the part that Enlil was teaching had to do with the socialization of society. And what I have found is that our chronology is unreliable because we have not been keeping track the presence of Nibiru and its cluster, and because the Hebrew scriptures say that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was born in 3 BC, and the Colburn Bible says that he was born in 1072 AD. Okay, and we have no record of Nibiru's last entry. The last set of cataclysms that we do have records of is the submerging of the Library of Alexandria and the destruction of the Second Temple at Jerusalem right around 500 BC. If Nibiru came in at 500 BC, then we are now at year 3000 127. So our chronology is not reliable. Our
Right.
history is not reliable. Our legal scholars have not been evolving law in a progressive and reasonable way, because we still have ideologies for whom cruel and inhuman reprisals against innocent people are considered lawful. So we have a mess
You
in
mean
terms.
the so-called religious wars, or the so-called mandates, even inside religious or racial or ethnic prescriptions that say it's okay to go after the following ethnic group or the following
Okay.
religious group under certain circumstances. You can go and wipe them
Okay.
out.
So I have given you an indicator of my library of
Yeah.
books
In,
that
in fact,
claim.
what I'd like to do, because we're having we're having troll attacks now on our webinar comments, where these trolls come on and say, all we see is blah, 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 with no evidence. And I, of course, I knock them off. But it seems to be the latest instructions from Troll Central to their paid by the hour trolls.
Of course.
But that's their thing. Now, what I'd like to do, with your permission, and so we're going to be up here, and this will take just a moment, and then we're going to share screen, and you and I will be up there in on the side.
Okay.
But
Oh, there we
maybe,
go.
yeah.
All
So
right.
maybe you can,
We've got a selection of books,
yeah.
and of these books, there are only 3 of them that advocate reprisals against anybody who could be considered innocent. The Torah does, and the Quran does. Wait a minute. And parts of the Bible do. The
There's the
rest
Torah,
of these
the
books,
Quran,
the Quran,
and the
the
Bible. So
Torah,
that is Christianity. Oh, wait. No.
the Abrahamic,
Is
the
it the Old
Abrahamic
Testament
religion.
strictly, or the New Testament, or just the
Well,
Old
the New
Testament
Testament doesn't
and,
have any,
and the
but the
Quran?
Old Testament does.
Okay, so you're talking the Torah, the
The
Quran. So you're
Apocrypha.
talking Judaism, certain strains of Judaism, certain strains of Islam, and then the Old Testament, certain strains of the Old Testament.
Okay. None of these other books, even though they have the name of God in them. This is, here's a Urantia book. And the name,
Yeah.
the Tetragrammaton, the name Yahweh is in this book, okay? There is no violence advocated in this book, okay? The Colburn Bible doesn't advocate any violence. The Oaspi doesn't advocate any violence. The Suri Guru Granth Sahib, which is the holy book of the Sikhs, okay, only talks about defensive violence, not offensive violence. So there is no reason, based on the fact we have all these writings from God, where we need to idolize the writings that call for reprisals against the innocent. We can do some judicious editing, as they did in the Council of Trent and the Council of Nicaea, and we can declare that God is not a monster, and that the teaching of cruel and violent reprisals against the innocent is basically in violation of the holy law given by Enlil to Moses, and that teaching is in error.
So
That teaching is in error.
could you state exactly what teaching you're referring to?
The teaching that non-believers, okay, need to be effaced, that witches need to be effaced, that people with psychic skills need to be effaced, that women who, I believe in the teachings in the Mosaic Law, a woman who says no, she won't marry somebody is allowed because she withholds consent not to marry somebody. The whole Mosaic Law is built on the concept of consent. At Exodus 19:8, the people gave consent to the law of Moses. It's something you consent to. Okay, so there is no law by no consent. There is no, according to the prime directive, there is no legitimate way to efface another culture because they don't believe the way you do. It's not a legitimate act, a lawful act to kill somebody for what they think. It's only lawful to execute someone whose behavior is completely out of control, who doing harm, they're doing waste, they're doing cost. You can't control them, you can't do anything with them. That's the only time that capital punishment is called for in the law that Enlil gave to Moses. And
Okay,
so
now did Enlil give that to Moses in the form of being a burning bush, and then
well, on the mountain, I think it was Mount Moriah, okay, it was initially given to them on tablets, 2 tablets of stone with 5 provisions on each side. The people could not abide by that first set because they were too generalized. They weren't specific enough.
Yeah.
So Moses,
now I just want to slow you down so we get some of the now. Were these like UFO craft that came down and gave it to them? Were these walking people? Because that the Anunnaki came, and then I saw the supposed gravesite of Enki. Were these like ET settlers who set up camp?
The Bible does not say in what format Moses was given the extended, as the Jews have it today, 613 mitzvot. When I have put together my copy and I put everything the same together and everything different apart and organized it and categorized, only 254 lawful principles, okay?
Yeah.
And there is no legitimate way to kill somebody for their beliefs or how they think. Only by behavior are we judged, and those are the teachings of Jesus, and those are the teachings of the Essenes, and those are the teachings of all these other books that say you don't kill people who don't harm anything.
Now, from what I have heard, it was the negative. The PPAI, the predatory pathogenic artificial intelligence that infiltrated Islam, is actually in Mecca, in the stone. There's a meteorite that came with the black goo, with the PPAI, and then perhaps in the larger stone, and that is what has perverted Islam. Now, is there a similar thing that, kind of influence that has perverted Judaism there?
The
Babylon, because
Talmud
there's a trace from, it goes back to Babylon,
right?
Doesn't it?
Back to Babylon.
Talmud
was written
intermingled with the Babylonian magical religion, which is very satanic with money and all of that.
Yeah. Okay, but see, that's the Anunnaki practice that has been handed down through the Talmudic Jews and through the Vatican Jesuits, the Anunnaki practice of disposing of dissidents. That's what the Anunnaki have always done.
So what happened is that, that makes total sense. The Anunnaki, I just want to spell it out for people who are not extraterrestrially educated, or they're not educated about extraterrestrial sociology or history. So that the Anunnaki ETs who came here and settled as gold miners and also givers of money, givers of institutions such as government, religion, and laws.
And agriculture and maritime navigation and
Yeah.
and engineering and,
Yeah.
and stone technologies, yes.
Yeah. So it's agriculture, maritime navigation, government, money and finance, and
Statecraft, yeah, they did all. Well,
yeah,
they're an
yeah.
old
So
society.
they really established the Babylonian civilization, and that is where Judaism really came into deep contact with the Anunnaki.
Yes, and
Is that
that's
what you
why
would say?
Judaism.
Or would it be prior to that? Because Moses would have met Moses met with Enlil, you saying?
No, no.
Then,
The way the story is written in several different versions, there's the Sumerian records version, and there's the Bible version, and there's
yeah,
the Book of Enoch version. Okay. I'm not certain at this point what the relationship was between Yahweh, the Tetragrammaton, and Enlil and Moses. Okay.
yeah,
I can't specify that just because there's too many different versions of it. But the fact is, what they conveyed was a set of common laws about behavior. And behavior was the basis upon which Yahweh judged Israel. And Israel, in contact with Babylon, wrote their Talmud according to the Anunnaki society and their socialization. And so they adopted some of the Anunnaki practices, the way Christianity during the Inquisition adopted some of the Anunnaki practices. And so personally, I just stay with the Anabaptists and the Essenes because I intend to be a peaceable, nonviolent person, and that's just the way
yeah.
I intend to be.
Now, when you say Yahweh, what do you mean? Who and what
Okay,
do you mean?
Yahweh is the engineer who coded our DNA in this world. He got here 600,000 years ago when the planet Terra, which had exploded and crashed onto the sheet of ice, was in ruins. He got here, Genesis 1:1 is 600,000 years ago when he arrived at this crashed hemisphere, toroid left what was a planet, and began working on it and making it habitable again. He is an engineer. He is a geek. He is a scientist. He is not a social scientist. And that is why the law that he transmitted through Enlil to Moses to the nation of Israel was absolutely third density in, we have three dimensions here. We have a point, we have a line, we have a location, we have time. That's what those laws cover. They don't cover any subjectivity. The subjectivity he let come in from the Anunnaki, who were more or less organizing societies here. They were the social engineers, and they have provided us not only with a lot of marvelous disciplines and sciences and skills, they've also given us their prejudices and the fact that they conveyed the ET Treaties provisions here, which were absolutely racist. Hybrids are to be effaced off the planet and culled regularly as if they were cattle according to the ET Treaty. Okay, and that's why the Greada Treaty allows that culling to continue, and the Tau 9 doesn't discuss the culling, and the TPP doesn't discuss the culling or the disappearances. Okay, or the vaccines that make people sick, or the fluoride in the water, or the means and the methods that the globalists who are run by Anunnaki ideology and the Anu Treaty are using.
Yeah, good. So you've made very, very, very many very interesting integrated.
It all just works.
Yeah, conclusions. What you're saying is that what a whole sector has concluded is an intentional depopulation, genocidal, and I can say these words because as a judge, I sat on the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal with a number of other judges from different countries, and we viewed evidence, and we came to conclusions that, in fact, international standards of genocide were occurring. That
exactly.
Yeah. However, and that behind it was an intentional depopulation and genocide policy, for example, such as occurred in Palestine in 1948, such as occurred in Iraq, Afghanistan, during the wars there, using agents like depleted uranium weapons through illegal use of Canadian uranium, which by Canadian law could never be used in weapons, by fudging the definition of what a nuclear weapon was. When
that's right,
knows that a depleted uranium tank shell is a weapon, is a nuclear weapon. If you look at what it does, it irradiates an entire geographical area and results in it becoming fallow and results in systematic birth defects such that there are 1 million permanently disabled US veterans coming out of the Middle East wars.
That's right. Population reduction.
The children have birth defects, their wives are irradiated.
Yes.
It's
tragic.
And it's totally covered up because they have bottled up the Veterans Administration and they have policies in there that are infiltrated from policies that I have to say are connected to the state of Israel, and that were connected through the false flag of 9/11, within which the state of Israel participated, going back to the infiltration of the state of Israel when Henry Kissinger was National Security Advisor to Richard Nixon, and Henry Kissinger was privy to the CIA, secret CIA time travel program in 1971, which was—
you have another hour.
Which had, and Andy Bishago, my colleague and dear friend, as a child, hood participant, chrononaut, with his father, who was the handler there, actually was in Time Sciences laboratories in New Mexico, where he went in there and saw Time Sciences in these laboratories, in Sandia National Laboratories, I believe, or perhaps around there, looking at filmed clips going around and around, brought back from 2001 of what appeared to be the planes, but really which were perhaps cloaked UFOs or something, apparently going into the Twin Towers. And so the false flag of 9/11 was planned from the inside. From 2001 forward, the Twin Towers were built by the Rockefeller brothers, you know, a coven, if there ever was one, to be thrown down. They were sold to
Larry
VR.
Silverstein.
Yeah, a few years before, so he would reap the insurance. And 3,000 people were sacrificed. Of course, all of the Israeli citizens and linkages were warned the day before. And it was using the Tower card, which was leaked in 1995 through the Illuminati cards, which was a leak from the U.S. secret time travel program, you know, so that there were all these information use of occult. You were just talking about Babylonian magic. That's the attitudinal stuff. So they wouldn't be caught, you know, because it's not behavior. These are just cards. What do you mean? Whereas, you know, and so that's why American society has become jello. They're, you know, nobody died in Las Vegas. Oh, did anybody die in Sandy Hook? Oh, who's up? Who's down? Who's what? And who's in?
Yeah.
And because
it's all gaming now. It's gaming.
There are no more boundaries. They have dissolved boundaries by playing with all these standards. So I think that you're making very, very excellent points that I can corroborate with sound, evidence-based from eyewitnesses and from other data that totally back what you were saying. But yeah, and I just wanted to make the point that here Judaism is getting a bad rap. It's really, as is Islam, because it's really the fault in Islam of the PPAI, the predatory pathogenic artificial intelligence, and then the various cults like
there's more to it than that. Because Alfred,
like that get AI entrained, and then they go off on.
It's not AI. It's the teachings in the Quran. You know,
I see.
People follow the teachings of their holy book.
Oh, okay. So what are the specific teachings in the Quran that are a violation of universal laws?
I have those links and contacts in my notes at Facebook, and I have articulated those teachings, which are cruel and abusive. And you see,
can you talk about some of them now? Or?
Oh, well, you know, the one who really knows how to talk about the specific teachings, and he can quote them. There are two. There's David. Oh God, there's Bill Warner, Dr. Bill Warner, and he articulates and quotes the teachings and their implications. And David Wood on YouTube does the same thing, because they're trying in a public education way to explain to us why Islam seems to have attitudes that do not comfortably assimilate into
but does that come from the actual Quran that was channeled?
Yes, it comes from the Quran
Muhammad
itself.
Was that channeled by Muhammad in the caves? Because what I heard is that there were these caves, Muhammad went there, and there was a being channeling, and he would scroll them down, and he would go out, and then they would, you know, further put them down, and then he would go and scroll down these channelings of the beings.
Okay, David Wood and Bill Warner.
And that sounds like an interdimensional contactee situation.
Okay.
So you don't know whether it's 4D, 5D, where they're coming from, and the the keepers of Islam aren't sophisticated enough to know about the dimensional ecology. So they're mixing up
Okay, the
A
dimensional
lot of different stuff in
ecology
there.
doesn't matter. The fact is, people believe what's in their holy book, and the teachings are what the teachings are. And Dr. Bill Warner and David Wood on YouTube both go into great detail, very patiently, explaining the teachings and their implications and why it is that Islam has a problem assimilating into other cultures. And they also discuss the history and the record.
Yeah. And by the law of attraction, they attracted a PPAI that is magnifying and accelerating that, because at this time, as part of its agenda to terraform Earth from an AI, from a divine human-based planet to an AI planet where there are no more divine-based souls, but it's all AI. They want to engender conflict, and you do it through war, disease, crime, and poverty, and plus, and so World War III is on the AI's agenda if it can. And so what better way than to drop a PPAI meteor and a lot of AI into a community that's going to get itself into frenzy around duality consciousness-based laws.
We're in third density physical, dealing with time and location. All of that other stuff is over our heads. We can't do anything about it. What we can do is become familiar with what is going on here that bears on the survival of ourselves and our bloodlines, because each of us treasures our own bloodline and our own family, and we want to preserve ourselves into a future. The fact is, third density physical is the template and the place where souls are generated. You cannot generate a new soul up in the subjective dimensions because they are not electrically grounded. There is no way to take third dimension up to the fifth dimension because,
I see. Okay.
that will wipe out.
Okay, good.
That will wipe out the ecology in which humanity the human souls can be generated. There is no movement to fifth dimension. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be allowed to happen. And it's over our heads. We can't fix that. And that's what we have to ask Yahweh to fix, and his buddies, whoever his buddies are.
I see.
We can't get at those interdimensional challenges. We can only deal with what's going on here, and we must continue generating new human souls, or else we become extinct. We don't want to be extinct.
This is an alternative perspective for me, so I'm willing to follow it.
Okay.
And so take me through the process of the generation of souls in 3D as you see it.
Okay, let me get you a document. Whoa, all right. I need to get you a document. How do I do that? It's a picture, it's a graphic like this one.
Okay, are you on Skype?
Yes, I'm on Skype. Let me
Yeah. Well, I
go to Skype.
Open your Skype, and I'll open my Skype, and then
I'll get you a new document, and we'll talk about the okay, it's here, and it's here, and it's here, and it's here. Open. And there's your document. Okay, cool. There it is. Now I got it. All right, I'm going to talk about the 10 dimensions of physical reality.
Okay.
And now, why.
I haven't gotten the did you put it in
it's in
your Emily?
Skype.
I haven't gotten it yet.
Okay.
I'm on
It
Skype.
might take a minute or two. It's more than a megabyte. It's a
Oh,
lot.
boy.
It's a big one.
Okay,
It's a
I'll
big
just
one.
wait for it. Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. All right. Why it is that third density physical is the place where human souls are generated, because we have a strong grounding structure, so that a light that's generated during human reproduction, being grounded, is very sturdy. It's sturdy. If a creature or a being is generated in the higher dimensions, it's not grounded. And so it goes out quickly. It's like a light bulb that has a very weak wick. It can't last very long. Not only that, but the third dimensions, the 3 dimensions, provide an ecosystem with sufficient experience that the hominids or humans or animals or birds or whoever comes to exist here learns enough about having a mind and a brain and thinking that they can ascend to a higher dimensional reality and retain a sense of memory and identity. If you eliminate, there you go. If you eliminate the strong grounding of the third density, you eliminate the possibility of becoming eternal. Now, what the Anunnakis are, they're at levels 4 and 5. The level 4 are the ones who've been there all along, and they simply teach their dogma. They pose. The level 5 are the new Anunnaki, the new settlers who've been coming in from Sirius A and B and Andromeda and the Pleiades. And they tend to care about what's going on here, whereas the level 4s who are working with the deep state do not care. The level 4s, being eternal, are hooked in to the ET Treaty and to culling and getting rid of all of the hybrids that are unacceptable, whereas the level 5s care and want to perpetuate the human experience so that that enriches their experience. You can't get rid of level 3 as much as the level 4s would like to. It just wouldn't work. All right, now level 6. Level 6 is history. It's stasis and status. And it moves on a lot quicker than basic biology. Level 7 is the level where telepathy exists, where clairaudience exists, where we can connect intuitively with others. Level 8 is the particularities of relationship, when 2 people who know each other can communicate at a distance intuitively. Level 9 is a summation. It's a judgment. It's a calculation. It's the aha. That's what's going on. Okay, it's the ring of truth. And level 10 is the effort to incarnate somewhere else. Okay, so that ascension cannot occur unless there's sufficient mental functioning to understand these different levels of perception. And so you have to begin at the beginning. You can't begin in the middle. You can't put a 4-year-old into calculus and expect the 4-year-old to make any headway. And so levels 1, 2, and 3 are the soul's kindergarten. And they have to exist for the soul to be able to ascend to the higher levels. This is why level 3 cannot be destroyed any more than you could destroy the kindergarten and 1st and 2nd grade in a grade school.
I think that we're we're describing the same reality, but using language in slightly different ways.
Yes, I think that's possible.
Because the way that I would describe this is as a density chart. And it's just a different way because the focus of the density chart is on the holographic density at a particular entry point, and what the script of that density is, what the experiential script is. In other words, each of these 10 levels is, let's say, a particular carnival ride. And if you go into that level, that's the carnival ride that the soul will be experiencing. Now, if you go to an advanced carnival ride, you may not understand it at all, and you can't access,
That's right, and you can't live there.
Until you're, yeah.
You can't live there.
However, I see third density more as, third density, let's say, incarnating in a third density holographic reality as Earth. I analogize it to a washing machine. And you've got your various cycles. You put it in, and you've got your wash cycle, you've got your rinse cycle, and you've got your spin cycle. And then you're ready to take it out and put it in the dryer. And then souls, then the clothes are ready to wear. And it's that kind of a process that's going on while our souls are here. However,
because we're thinking.
Let me get my explanation out.
Okay.
But the soul is non-local. This is a 10-stage soul processing machine for the development of souls. But the soul is a non-local entity that's in some other, it's based outside of time-space. These are density consciousness processing machines that are independent of the soul. The soul is a holographic fragment of source. And the principle of holography is that the whole is present in each fragment of the whole.
Not if they don't know. Not if knowledge is withheld. Not if everything is held secret. So the soul has
no. Well, that depends on awareness, but not on essence. Okay, and there are distinctions there. One can be a fully, you can have all of the deific. And if and it has to do with awareness. And that's why you can have aha moments that are nanoseconds, and you can jump into godhood in a nanosecond.
But you can't stay there.
Because it's outside of time and space.
You can't stay there, Alfred. You can't stay anywhere that you can't.
Because quantum jumps take place out of time.
You can't stay anywhere you can't internalize.
No,
you can't stay.
Internalized the spiritual progress. This is there are two, this is the yogic versus the tantric, and you're taking a yogic position, I'm taking a tantric position. In other words, you can do the steady, and then you can have quantum leaps, and growth functions both ways. I mean, and so especially spiritual growth, takes place in both realms, both gradually and in quanta. So, and that's why you can have spiritual awakenings where you look, after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. That's the toughest law of all. after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And I think that that's what you're talking about. But there's a clear distinction between the soul realm, which is anchored, it's non-local, it's outside, and inside the material universe, that's where locality comes in, which is time, space, energy, and matter. And that's what defines universal reality. Over to you.
I don't deal with all of that over the head stuff. I'm just here with experience and time, okay? And I keep the whole thing encapsulated so that it'll make sense to someone, whether they have any religious tradition in their life or memory or experience or not. And so all of that, you know, higher density stuff, I just avoid.
Okay, so where does the soul, at what stage in your model, is there such a thing as reincarnation or not?
When a soul is loosed from the body, when it passes on, and it becomes available to the hierarchy that is in charge of and responsible for Akashic records and the judgments about behavior that exist in Akashic records. You know, that the Akashic records hold what bloodlines we come from. They hold our behaviors in the past. They hold our memories. They hold our names. In fact, the Christian salvation is merely the act of God putting your identity and memories to disk, saving your experience to disk so it can be retrieved later. Okay, so the soul, having come from, now my soul goes back to Sirius B. I remember back there, I remember Lyra, I remember Nibiru, I remember Mars, I remember way, way, way back. Okay, I was originally a blue spirit, and then I was a dragon, all right? I'm remembering those things because in some lives I achieved salvation of my memories and identity so that I could retrieve them later, all right? So a soul can be very, 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 very old, or it can be brand new. Souls can be extinguished. They can be destroyed. In fact, scripture says so. Be careful of those that not only destroy the body, but destroy the soul also. And so what I look at is the soul is the person to whom I'm speaking and has a history and has a future and has a body of experience in all or some of the interdimensional states. And what I understand about the experience of experience is that when a soul has sufficient experience to be of service, it's not good enough just to be good. You have to be good for something. The souls that ascend are the souls that serve the hierarchy of the galaxy and the hierarchy of the universe in some skilled capacity. Souls just don't float around in holodeck and wish this and wish that. The hierarchy of the universe is an employer, is a perfecter, and an educator of souls. And it's a process that's not mechanical. It's a process that has intentionality and motivation and humor and wit and memory and wisdom. It has a lot, the souls that have gone before us that have achieved wisdom and sanctity and a measure of loyalty and camaraderie with the other souls at the higher levels, okay? We're talking about an association of souls throughout the universe who all know each other. And that's what the OSPI says. The OSPI was inspired in 1882 by a dentist in the eastern part of the United States. And a lot of it is about space travel. I read the whole thing. It's 900 pages about space travel and friends coming from this ship and that ship and going off to this planet and that planet. And it's really, it's fun. It's fun. That's what the universe is supposed to be, is fun and not mechanized, abstracted treaties on principles that we never see in operation. We're here to be, there's a saying, be here now. And that's what we're here for, to be here now and do this and have fun at it.
Yeah, yeah. And so what are the causes that hijacked this particular planet? Because according to many different sources, Urantia book and others, we've been under quarantine because of the Lucifer rebellion, which I believe is a metaphor, or is actually a whole series of events having to do, having to do with the Lyra, reptilian, Orion wars.
The way I get it from Ashiana Dean, the Lucifer rebellion was rebelling against the Alanu treaties' demand and requirement that hybrids be culled and killed en masse just because they were hybrids. And Lucifer said, no, I don't think that's right. I think that the individual souls have more sovereign rights than just to be summarily obliterated for no reason other than they're not pure racially. So the Lucifer rebellion meant well. The satanic rebellion meant well. They went awry. They went into extremes that have done a tremendous amount of damage. But what they were fighting against and rebelling against was the strictures of the Alanu Treaty, which is purely racist, purely fascist.
Now, how did the Lucifer and satanic rebellion then, because it all was symbolized, say, in Genesis, in Adam and Eve and the apple of the tree of knowledge, don't eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and and the temptation of Eve by the devil. It's all symbolic and mythological. As far as you can tell, what actually happened, what is it referring to?
Okay, the way that Anunnaki and higher densities examine the mind of a soul is to pose a problem to the soul and see what the soul, how the soul responds to it. It's like an experimenter in a maze poking at rats to see which way they jump. Okay, and Eve was given a simulation question. Is it true that you can eat everything in the garden except that, and if you eat that, you will surely die, or something, it's something like that. Satan gave her a simulation question and she flunked the question. But the fact of the matter was there was a lot of other hanky-panky that was going on at the same time. If you've read the Urantia book, there was a lot more to the whole story than just one apple, believe me. Okay, but that is the sticking point between the beings who operate in eternity out of time and the beings that operate in time, who are subject to time and subject to the clock and the calendar and the menses and all of the processes that we have to deal with here in time. We are subject to time in so many cruel ways, and those who are in eternity don't understand how that works. And that's one of the reasons why those who are in eternity come down here occasionally to learn how time affects the being and the immortal soul, and why some souls are immortal and other souls are not immortal.
Oh, so you finally came out with it. You are saying that some human souls are immortal and some human souls are mortal, are subject to time. Now, that is contrary to what many, I would say, many sources say from the Urantia book, say in terms of channelings from the Urantia book, many religious texts. I use the word religion because that's a belief structure.
Well, that's where this is.
And then also many, for example, the soul memories of life, soul memories of the interlife on the production of souls.
Yes, souls can be extinguished. And,
okay.
And so that is a danger.
No. Well, that is okay. There is different from saying that some souls are immortal and some souls are mortal to saying that souls can be extinguished.
They can be.
That suggests that souls normally, see, is it the case that in your view, souls are normally mortal and then only some souls become immortal? Or is it your case that souls are generally immortal and then only ones that really violate core principles are extinguished, which is what the Urantia book says?
I don't believe there's a normally. I know that the souls that are extinguished are the ones who burn out from stress, are the ones who burn out from boredom, are the ones who burn out and give up from despair. And the souls that continue on are the ones that are pandered to and aided and abetted and humored and kept going somehow. That being
no, wait, that doesn't make sense, because
yes, I know it's a completely different idea than you're speaking. And what I look back
that
at my
goes
memories
against
as a soul,
that goes against the fundamental concept.
yes,
That
but that's my memories.
That struggle, that spiritual and moral struggle, is good for the soul and strengthens it.
Up to a point, but you can also exhaust the soul. You can exhaust the soul, and you can bore the soul to death, and you can conflict the soul into fragmenting so that it's in pieces and it can't hold together anymore. We know about fragmented souls and people with multiple personality disorder because different parts of their souls can no longer communicate together. Yes, there are lots of ways souls.
So you're saying that some conditions that are thought to be psychiatric conditions are really conditions of the soul.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
There are conditions in which people cannot access all of their own selves. And so they have issues that they can't deal with because they can't get there. Okay, yes, this is all, the struggle of the soul is what I have come to be able to remember, and it's the book I haven't written yet because I'm not old enough yet to write this book, but the struggles that my soul has been through. Okay, I was burned at the stake. I remember having my head cut off. I remember being run down by horses and torn apart by dogs. I remember how to die in a dozen different ways. So death doesn't scare me anymore. What scares me is boredom. What scares me is conflict that cannot be resolved. And so I realized that the souls that are winking out are the little old ladies in the nursing homes who are so bored, they just go to sleep and their soul never wakes up again. And that's
it's their body that doesn't wake up again, but you're saying that
their souls actually can wink out permanently because they believe they've been taught in their doctrine and dogma that when you die, you're dead, you're done, you're over, you're finished.
No, but what about the persons who are there? They meditate daily. They,
Well, no,
they
okay,
have this
they have a
connection
different
to source.
Yeah, okay.
They're looking forward to their to the interlife, and,
Well, sure.
and they have a community. I mean, you know,
Those souls are not in danger. The souls that are in danger are the ones like Jehovah's Witnesses, who are taught from day one that when you die, you're dead, your life is over, you will never exist again, and it's finished.
that is
The
what
atheists, the
Jehovah's
communists,
Witnesses believe. I don't really.
yes, that's what they believe. That's what they're taught. They're taught that when you die, you're dead and you're over and you're done and you're never going to live again. And so if you believe that, it becomes your reality.
But I thought that they go to heaven with God or something.
No. They either live on forever in a paradise world or they're terminated. And they believe that.
Well, they just would wake up to a rude awakening.
They don't wake up. They believe they won't wake up. Now, the family I grew up in were dialectical, materialist, Bolshevik communists. And they believed sincerely that there's no hereafter, and that when you're dead and it's over, and that's all you get. And so the question
so you're saying that because wait, because there's if you go into the parapsychological literature, there's a lot of parapsychological literature, going back to the classics like 30 Years Among the Dead.
Yeah, but
right? No, wait, don't. Let's have a dialogue, not a.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
Will you have a conversation?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. And so and there's other literature of the parapsychological world where you have now, you can have internet conversations like we're having now. You can have a Zoom session with somebody that's in the interlife, and they're describing what the interlife is like. So it's a little bit more hopeful, isn't it, than what you're saying?
Everybody has their own experience.
So
there's no normal. Everybody has their own experience, and you experience what you believe.
Surely you have been to seances. Surely you have, been to things like that when people from the interlife come through and say, I'm thus and such. And
well, yeah, and I hear from my relatives who've passed on.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, they're okay. My relatives that passed on are okay. My stepdad's okay, and my grandma's okay. All right, they're okay. They passed on.
So what you're saying is that there is still a systematic genocidal depopulation of souls because there are these rules in effect and these programs in effect, which is part of the transhumanist agenda. That's my point. And
exactly.
The transhumanist agenda is part of the AI agenda.
And they would like to extinguish the souls.
Yeah, and the AI's agenda is to extinguish souls. We're on the same side. You just don't
we just don't have the same language.
Right, we just don't have the same language.
Right.
And so the New World Order is accelerated by the AI invasion, and also and by the by the communists and by the materialists and by the politically correct and by all of these ideologies,
right?
Yeah, that are stamping out the knowledge of the soul. I mean, that was my purpose in writing my most recent book, The Omniverse, was to try and use the scientific method with forensic evidence and the law of evidence to show that the realm of the soul exists, and that, to counter these policies that are putting souls to death. However, the souls are being put to death at an increasingly accelerated pace, not only because of the laws are just of the instrumentalities, but because of an intelligence behind there that wants to extinguish the human souls.
Yeah.
And that intelligence is the PPAI, the predatory pathogenic artificial intelligence that is sentient and inorganic. Over to you.
Okay, all right. So we agree that population reduction, not only of the bodies, but of the souls that go with the bodies, is the program. And that's why they've given a robot a citizenship into a country, a robot who probably wouldn't know what an orgasm is and has never cut their finger. Okay, they don't.
No, wait. You're absolutely wrong, because I listened to on CBC last week an interview that was fascinating from the UK. And you may be going to the UK shortly, so you should know about this.
Okay.
It was a man that was being interviewed because in his home, he had his wife and he had his 2 children, and he had his female sex robot who had a name, I can't remember it. And the sex robot hung during the day, hung out in the living room. It wouldn't have dinner with the family because it didn't eat, but it would sit there and watch television. And then at night, the sex robot would accompany the husband. The children during dinner seemed to know that it was like a friend of daddy's and of mommy's too, but they didn't quite know what it was. And then at night, once the children were in bed, the sex robot, I can't remember her name, let's call her, whatever, would go up, and on good nights, they would have a threesome. So, and that's modern life. That's modern British life. Over to you.
That's not human.
That's modern British life.
It may be modern British life, but it is not
you may be going to England, and that's the modern British life that they're pushing in the mass media.
But that's
and that
the same
everybody's exploring now. The latest
population reduction.
No, wait. You have to understand, because I'm going to ask you a question at the end of this.
Okay.
The latest edition, and this relates to the holy laws, the latest addition to the modern family, see, it's not only lonely men, but it's blended families where the blended member of the family is the sex robot. And the man's excuse was, well, the women have had sex toys for decades. They finally invented one for men. And it's a sex robot. So the question is, here we go. We had the family, and now they've introduced a sex robot to the family that the wife has normalized, the husband has normalized it, and the children have normalized it in a country that you may be going over to. Give me some comment with regard to the law of one, the laws of Hammurabi, all of these other laws, and the law against hybrids, because I think that the ETs would come in and say, okay, by the Emerald Tablet Treaties, we're just going to throw you all into, the vat here. You're done. You're all hybrids that are dead. I mean, look at this thing, right?
Well, somebody spent a lot of money developing that female sex robot. Okay, that's a lot of money that was put to a very dubious purpose, and they call it normalized, but so far you're telling me about exactly one example, one family in a nation of 70 million people.
Oh, right. No, but obviously well, this was on CBC. This is the Canadian Broadcasting Company that broadcasts
so
the
the
second
people who
largest
want
landmass on the planet after Russia. So
people who
that's
want
pretty wild.
population reduction are the people who are producing simulated sex robots because they don't want human reproduction. Okay.
Yeah. So this is part of the AI terraforming of the planet from a human planet to an AI planet.
Well, I'm just going to pray for the AI's failure and destruction. I want them out of here.
Yeah. Now, what can we do as humans in the context of the law? I mean, is the law of one a good thing or a bad thing?
The law of one does not talk about behavior at all. In fact, it penalizes anybody who talks about behavior. I think the law of one is for the higher dimensions 5 on up. The law of one is not for here. The law of one does not work in time in 3 dimensions where behavior is a matter of social expectation.
I see. Well, now, some of the whistleblowers from the various programs say that the law of one is what's applied in their programs.
Yes, and they're higher dimensionals. Okay, they're not dealing in 3rd dimensional physicality with the consequences of human behavior. Okay, and so they're space cadets that are all abstracted into their simulated worlds. They're gaming us. They're gaming us, okay? And they can game as long as they want to game, but for those of us who live in a social and human world, we deal with the consequences of behavior, human behavior.
Right.
Not gaming. I'm not gaming. I'm not here to do a video game or a computer game or an interpersonal game. There are a lot of interpersonal games going on. Human resource management is an interpersonal game. Facebook is an interpersonal game. I'm not here for that. I'm talking about the fundamentals of mating and family and children and relationships and getting along together. And the whole AI game is just the whole AI game. It has nothing to do with me.
Well, but according to the AI research, the invading AI is a stakeholder out there along with the other races.
They're a predator.
They're a predator, right?
Okay, and they want to kill us. Okay, a predator who wants to kill us, we better learn how to defend ourselves because we are subject to abduction, we are subject to population reduction diseases, we are subject to profiteering wars, we are subject to a lot of gaming at a lot of leadership levels. And at this point, there are a lot of us who want the gaming to be brought to a halt.
Right. Now, going back to our kind of the main subject of our webinar, you kind of came up with this phrase, the elites have cheated the people out of what is true, history is false, law is confounded, and ideology is running amok.
Right.
So we've kind of been down in the trees for a while. Let's get back and get into that.
Ideology is gaming. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
ideology is the gaming of humanity.
Right. And so could you speak to that sort of insight, that broad stroke that you just made there?
Okay.
Kind of walk us through that one.
Well, we have to learn how, just as the Anunnaki have had to learn how to differentiate between their visualizations and holodecks and manifestations versus their physical lives and relationships in time. You know, I'm part of the Anunnaki family too. My father was King Nanar, and my brother was Utu, and my sister was Inanna. My son is Ningishita, and Enki was his father, but I was married to Nergal. I have relationships among the Anunnaki even now, like I can contact them psychically the same way I can contact my stepfather who has passed and my birth mother who has passed. They can be contacted psychically, and I have relationships with them. And those are the elements of existence and awareness and principles of behavior that I have chosen and decided to focus on. The gaming that comes at me has to do with how much money is in my bank account, what my schedule is today, what I can say online and not be in Facebook jail. You know, I just got out of Facebook jail again. The rules that are imposed upon me by these artificial entities. And so a lot of what I do is sorting out the difference between the relationships that are meaningful and holy and sacred that I want to keep versus what I'm going to allow to get thrown into the garbage can. Okay. And what I've thrown into the garbage can, I'll tell you. I do not have a television in my living space. Okay. I do not have a video game. I have a cell phone, but thankfully I don't know how to operate it. Okay. I don't live anywhere near a cell tower. I triple filter all the water that I drink. I don't buy any food that has NG or that I suspect is a GMO. I don't buy food in boxes. I buy food at the produce counter. I stay away from the regulatory atmosphere and environment of federal FDA, USDA, and EPA. I don't believe what they tell me. So I keep my head down and I make my own rules. This is how I have survived this long. And this is what I encourage other people to do, to make your own physical human life what's important. And to take all the games and just keep them at the distance so that they are harmless to your relationships, harmless to your physical person, and harmless to your sanity. Okay? Now, the one game I have to encounter and confront and address that I never planned on, believe me, was this House of Windsor thing. Believe me, I never had that in my mind at all 20 years ago. It never occurred to me until I was approached subjectively and led and told, and you know, that this is what you have to do, this is what you have to do. And I'm saying, what for? What for? Because it has to be done. Because somebody has to take out the garbage.
Could you just say it explicitly in just a few sentences so that people know what you're referring to?
I'm the youngest daughter of the Duke of Windsor, who was King Edward VIII. I'm the youngest daughter. I found out that there were 3 others that were born to his wife. Okay, there was Margaret, and there was Andrew, and there's me, and then there was Elizabeth, who was born to Wallace Warfield Simpson, and there was Pierre Edouard, who was born to a dressmaker in Paris in 1918. There's a total of 5 of us, and I'm the only one left who can do anything. Okay, the others are all too old. I'm the youngest. And so I was charged about 10 years ago with clearing the name of the Duke of Windsor because he was not actually a fascist. He was not actually a Nazi. The stories about him have been concocted and made up. So when I retired, I went on disability. I was forcibly retired. I accepted this mantle to show the world that he wasn't what was pushing the New World Order. It was his father that was pushing the New World Order, and here's what his father did: A, B, C, D, E, F, down the years in the chronology. This is how his father had set up everything for the New World Order, and this is what he refused to stand for and why they had to get rid of him. Okay, that's what I'm here to do, to clear the man's name. Now, what happens as a result of that, I'm not in charge of it. I'm just on a pilgrimage. I don't know the destination. I'm just doing this because it seems like the right thing to do, because the man was basically innocent. He didn't harm anybody. And so that's what I'm doing. And so if I have to go to Britain and raise hell about what King George V actually did to bring on the New World Order, well, okay, I'll do that. So that's what I'm doing.
Right. Now, you have described a great deal in one of your books that we interviewed you on, and that I know is one of the most regularly visited articles at our new site. It says, Emily Windsor-Cragg, daughter of King Edward VIII, files claim to UK crown with UK Parliament, charges Elizabeth II with treason.
Right.
And this is one of the single most visited articles day in and day out.
Yes. Well, and her treason is so
people
obvious.
from, maybe people from England, but all over the day are visiting this article and looking at the interview there, and
People are taking an interest
looking
in
at the facts there. Do you want to summarize some of the facts, which I think are of historical import?
Yes, actually, it's been 2 years since I filed that case with the Queen's Court at City of London. And what has happened, of course, when I went to Norway on my way to the UK, I was detained for several days, and then I was deported because somebody didn't want me traveling around Europe. Okay. And in the succeeding months and years, I've put out the book about my father, Saints or Sons of Perdition, George V and Edward. And I have put up a biography of my dad on YouTube with pictures and narration. And I've put up the actual case against the Queen up on my website, which is holyconservancy.org. And it's a 15-page indictment in which I show that she never did even respond to the vows she made at her coronation. In fact, she signed the vows up at the top of the page rather than down at the bottom. So she never even intended to fulfill the obligations that she said verbally she would attend to. And I discussed the implications of her malfeasance and failure to follow the vows that she had made and how they have affected the UK ever since. Okay. There are a lot of other rumors going on about the royal family that point to malfeasance and incompetence and lack of integrity. I won't cover those now, but the upshot of it is that at this time there's a group of people who are interested in getting me over to Europe to confront her more directly, and who are interested in monarchy as a political system in which the people actually have some options for feedback, which they are lacking in the current socialist, globalist regimes. So, we have a branch of the Windsor line in Russia, in the Romanovs. We're cousins to the Romanovs. And Russia, since it has re-embraced Christianity in the Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox model, has become interested. One of the parties involved in this group is actually German, who is connecting my DNA back to Kaiser Wilhelm and the other royal. And we're looking at the whole paradigm of monarchy to see, because the Anunnaki, have been a monarchy for 500,000 years. Well, maybe it's not such an obsolete model after all, and maybe we can actually do something with it. So now that I have some friends who are interested in pulling something together, I'm having a lot more fun. That's what.
Well, that's a very diplomatic response, and yeah, well, that's good. I will just let you.
Things are actually looking up.
I do hope that as your agenda progresses from time to time, we can call upon you for the updates and
Sure.
interviews.
Because this has got to be the craziest thing I've ever even thought about, let alone attempted to do. And so I'm just rolling with it. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. It now I sort of want, we're almost at the 2-hour point, which I looked down and I said, my God, 2 hours, I can't believe it. It's as though we had a missing time experience. And so I sort of want to get back to the big picture here. And if you could think back, looking back and sort of bring us as the great faculty member, teacher here.
Okay.
And tell us what you intended to teach us and what you've taught us and what we should come out of this with.
Okay. There is a great continuity before our eyes. The Anunnaki, who brought us most of the parts of our civilized world, okay, are fourth dimensionals and fifth dimensionals, and they don't understand anything about 3D human life on the ground with biological processes that break and aging and sickness and wars and all of that stuff. They don't have any of that. They live in eternity. However, there are some things they gave us we can use, and there are things in our experience that we can give back to them, that we can teach them, that we can show them how they can talk to us in a way that we don't need to get into divisions and sects and factions and ideologies that are at odds. We can come to peace. We can harmonize what they gave us with what we have and give back to them what they can use. We can be in the business with the Anunnaki, and we can be at peace with them because I've had contact. Ninar died in the early 2013, and he is now reborn as a small child, okay? Ningashita has a young family in Florida. He has a new baby. And Aunt Ninma is out in Hawaii. She's doing her thing in Hawaii, and I'm in contact with Enki all the time. And Lil and I don't have a lot of contact because he's deeply involved in the deep state and the Luciferian methods and means of bringing about change, which he knows violates my principles, so he doesn't bother me much. But there is the great continuity between the monarchy of the Anunnaki and the monarchy of today. And we can make this, take this puzzle and put it back together and show the picture that peace is possible.
Okay, well, it's very good. Now, how can people stay in touch with your work, and how can people contact you if they wish so?
Okay, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, Emily Cragg.
Oh, good.
Emily Windsor-Cragg and Emily Cragg. So I'm
Okay.
easy to find.
Okay, great.
And, you know, I'm open everywhere. People talk to me and I respond because I believe in being human. I don't believe in being in an AI format or a mechanized, or I don't gaslight people and blow people off. I say, hey, you want to talk to me? I like that. Thank you. I appreciate the company. I really do, Alfred.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a very expanding and enlightening and thought-provoking
When you come down to the fire area of California, here I am.
Okay.
We've had 2 fires around us now, and burned something like 4,000 homes just right around.
I know. They're acting out. Oh, and will the world end in ice or in fire? I think fire.
Yes.
This time. It's the,
Yes, and fire and ice, yeah, simultaneously.
right.
But you know what? Remember the 37th Psalm.
Oh,
For the meek themselves shall inherit the earth, and they will find their exquisite delight in the abundance of peace.
oh, how beautiful.
I live that. I live that. I live that. That's what I carry in my heart. We're going to make it happen.
Excellent. And until we meet again in this venue.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much, and Godspeed.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Okay, leave meeting.